Sear, our non-stimulant, thermogenic, and recomposition agent. Sear is a super cool product because it's going to help you utilize turning your white adipose tissue, which is for storage of fat, into brown adipose tissue, which is going to help with energy production. So this is great to use for a competition prep or in your weight loss phase. So you can stack it with a stimulant-based thermogenic, or you could also use it in your off-season or muscle building phase to help keep you lean and mean. Sear.
Welcome back to the Pro Physique Code. We got IFBB Pro Evan Wells.
What's up?
We got NPC nationally qualified bikini competitor Alexis Maitland. How are you? I'll just call you Alexis. It's Alexa, isn't it?
Yes, I am Alexa.
Sorry for everyone out there.
I feel like if someone's listening to this podcast, we can mess with their house.
Oh yeah, it's gonna trigger that. Yeah, that's a great point. I think I told this like mini story before on here, but one time I remember going to this dermatologist appointment, and it was the first time I ever went there. And I got there, and they were like checking me in, and they like whispered my name. And at first I thought they were just trying to be like confidential, but I'm like, it's my name. I don't feel like you can say it out loud. And then I realized they didn't want to like say my first name because they did have an Amazon Alexa and they didn't want to like trigger her. So yeah.
That's right. Alexa, play dinosaur facts. Things that happen
every day.
These are things that you hear when you have kids.
Yep.
Alexa, play this chicken wing song. Chicken wing, chicken wing. Anybody that doesn't have right now is like, whatever. All on meth today. What is happening?
Yeah, you're fired up. You're fired up about our topic today. That's what it is.
Great topic. I'm fired up about North Americans. I've got 11 fantastic competitors going, and I'm actually I took a weekend off. I stayed home this weekend. So it's like, I'm excited to go to Pittsburgh. It's always a fun city to go to. It's a great, it's a one-day show. It's just exciting. It's a big show. It's this is the show where Daraja started her career. So it's always fun to go back, and Daraja is going to come with us this year. So.
Well, it'll be interesting to see if it is like a big number-wise show, because I know we were just talking about the shows that took place this past weekend, NPC shows, and the numbers were pretty small, like for being the week before North Americans.
Well, so today's topic is basically things that we're noticing as coaches this year. And I think that can come down to nutrition, to training, to show strategy, to things that we're seeing at shows. So we'll go over some of the topics of the trends in the sport. And I think when you're a coach that, coaches competitors and travels to shows, and you do have a unique perspective that maybe not everybody else has, because with social media, it's hard to tell what's going on. You can see somebody be like, yay, I got second in my class. I'm nationally qualified. And then you go on NPC News Online, and you're like, oh, there was only 2 in their class. So congratulations.
Yeah,
but
that a lot.
Yeah, that's not hating, but I see a lot of times I got top 3, and you look and there's 3 people in the class situation. Yeah.
And to be fair,
right. Or
you survived prep. You got up there and somebody else didn't,
and that's a win. It is a win. That's not a win.
Yeah, so we kind of we made a list before this just so we had a little bit of structure and guidance, but we're just going to kind of have a casual conversation about things we've noticed this year, with shows, with competitors, with with everything. This was actually a topic that you guys voted for on so I put up a poll on my Instagram, and I think like we'll probably start doing that more frequently, just putting up some topic ideas and having people vote just to see what you guys want to hear most on. And the majority of you guys actually voted on this topic, so that's why we're diving into it.
Rock and roll, Lexi. You're in charge today. Take over.
Oh, okay. Well, so we'll start with just the first thing on the list. So I don't think we need to go too far into depth on this because we've talked in lots of episodes before this episode on this topic. But I mean, the biggest thing, and I think the most obvious thing we've all noticed this year, is the show sizes are just a lot smaller. Now, of course, and we've said this before too, that doesn't necessarily mean the quality of competitors is worse. Like, I think there's still great quality competitors competing. There just seems to be a lot smaller of shows this year. Like we were just counting the number of competitors in the past 2 shows this weekend that we were familiar with. And I mean, the number of bikini competitors alone in each show was pretty low.
That's the division that I pay the closest attention to is obviously bikini. And so Tampa a couple weeks ago was a big shock to me. And then following that, the Texas Pro, which is in Dallas. Both shows had the best judges in the sport. You got Tyler Mannion, you got Etzela there, you've got Bill Sibilia there. You've got the judges that are literally going to be the head judges at all the national shows, all the pro shows. So it's a really good opportunity. And I think as a coach, that's where I want to put my athletes. And I had a pretty decent number of athletes, but not only were the bikini divisions small, but the men's divisions were tiny, which usually when you have a Steve Weinberger and a Tyler at a show, the dudes show up. So that's been throwing me. Is just what happened? Prejudging was done by like 9:30 a.m. on Friday or on Saturday, Lexi.
Which show are we talking about? Tampa?
Yeah.
Yeah, I vividly remember because I remember I felt so bad because I had a couple of local girls that were going to come to just watch, and I told them, get there at like 9:30, and I think you'll be fine. You'll get there in time for bikini amateur, and I'm pretty sure amateur bikini was over by like 9:30, and yeah, it went by quick. And then there was a show this past weekend that I know you and I, Paul, we both had girls in, and I mean, I remember my client was texting me, I think it started at 9 and she was texting me like 10:15. She was already finished. So within a matter of like an hour, 75 minutes, they were done with the whole prejudging.
Yeah, so I'm going to do some quick math because I like the data of it. Like for me, I like the data. I think we've talked a little bit about the national numbers. Well, because it's one thing to be at the show and feel like, oh, it feels a little off. But, if we're looking at NPC Tampa, so typically Tampa, the reason it's so powerful is because you get the big judges, Steve Weinberger, Tyler, Bill. Those are your judges for North Americans and for, the bigger shows, for men and the women. So the bikini division had, gosh, 25 total and open.
Yeah.
Total and open. This year. I mean, I don't know. That just seems, and sometimes you'll be at a show, you'll think there's more people there because you're like, oh, well, it's taking a while, but that's because they do true novice A and B, masters 35 and 45. And, there'll be a whole host of competitors. But if we just look at last year, the bikini division at this show, oh, wow, was it much bigger? I didn't even realize this. So actually last year, Evan and I can put a little feather in our cap. So Evan's competitor won the true novice overall, the novice overall, and Ashton, my girl, won the open overall. 20, 26, 31, 41, 45. So 20 less competitors.
And that didn't even seem that big last year either.
And it wasn't big.
Yeah,
it wasn't big for its normal quality last year. That's what I'm saying. So like to go from 45 to 25, I don't know. It's just something is changing. And I as a coach, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about what are we noticing this year?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that this can segue really well into one of the things we were talking about before we started, and something else we're noticing is there is this like seems to be this really big gap between the quality of like amateurs versus pros. And I mean, I get there's always going to be a difference in just the look and the quality there, but I think it comes down to like everything we're talking about right now, right? If you go to a show and there's only 20 girls and, maybe none of those girls quite have 100% the full package, but at the end of the day the judge has to award somebody, right? They're going to award whoever is closest to the standard, even if that person isn't spot on. And then you have those people going to nationals, and so there can be, I don't know, I feel like it's tough, right? Because if you go to a small show and they award somebody who doesn't quite have everything, but they have to award somebody, then there becomes this like big gap in the amateurs versus the pros.
Yeah, and I think the other trend that I've noticed this year, and we talked a little bit about this, was new competitors, like true novice competitors, are getting pro cards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Pro cards
I
and
went to this show this year, and I had a couple competitors there. The young lady that won True Novice, she didn't win her open class. I don't even know if she won the True Novice overall, but I just remembered her. She had a great shape and she looked great. She went to Junior Nationals and won her class at Junior Nationals, like Class B. It's one of those like classes where sometimes, you'll have a bigger, it might have been but still a True Novice in her second show turning pro. I think it's a problem. I think it's a problem for the sport because you're literally taking all the girls that are talented, that are going to be competing in the NPC at the national level for years to come, and you're just putting them in the pro league. And the gap between the NPC and the pro league has gotten huge. Used to be
Yep.
you could be a good NPC competitor and get in there. No. Yeah. And I don't know. It might be hard for these girls. It's discouraging.
Well, it's going to be
yeah,
discouraging because once they they never even got a chance to understand controversy at the amateur level.
Well, and
When you go to the
competing is
pro
fun.
ranks,
And if you've got to take 2 to 3 years off before you can be competitive in your league, I think that takes away from, and not for nothing, but the NPC is fun. It's fun. You go to shows. If you look good, you're going to be competitive. You can look great as a pro and not be competitive.
nope.
And it's not necessarily fun.
right. I know.
Now,
I
granted,
think like
you are allowed to decline your pro card if you want to, but I don't think anybody would actually do that.
Never heard of anyone doing it other
No.
than Jose Raymond. He's the only person. He turned it down like 3 years in a row. But that's before they had weight classes in the open bodybuilding, and he was like 180 pounds, winning his pro card at the nationals every year, and he just kept turning it down. But he kept coming back and doing the show again to get better.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's my thing. Is like that's the thing I'm noticing. The competitors that should probably take 2 to 3 years to turn pro are turning pro in 2 shows.
And I think a lot of that's to do with they're the most genetically blessed and they have the most natural talent and they have the best shape.
Well,
And a
and
lot
I
of
think
times,
a lot of coaches aren't even allowing competitors to grow into their bodies. They're just putting them on drugs right away.
yeah, there's a lot of
Definitely
that.
a trend. I mean, that's a trend I've noticed for a few years now, is that drug use is way more common for new competitors versus like taking a competitor that's been in NPC for 4 or 5 years, kind of maxed out, and you go, okay, now if you want to take that next step, you're going to need to do a little something. I think they're not even waiting for that. They're just going, boom, let's just do it now.
I'd probably say half the
I,
consultations I have are for people that have had consultation with other coaches, and they ask me about, PEDs and my thoughts on them and if I require it. And that always catches me off guard. Like, do I require it? And kind of find out the vast majority of consultations they had, that's the first topic that is brought up, and saying
Yeah.
that if you want to be successful at this sport, you're going to need to do something. And this
Yeah.
is on an initial consultation when they don't know anything about this person, their training, their diet, how long they've been doing anything. It's the first conversation they have.
Yeah.
yeah, I do feel like, I mean, drugs have obviously always been a thing, but I would agree with you, Paul. I feel like there has been this kind of influx in coaches pushing drugs pretty hard on newer competitors before allowing them to truthfully maximize kind of what they can do naturally by just training hard, taking a growing season. And, I think it's hard to observe that though, because drugs are definitely a very taboo subject in this industry. A lot of, especially for bikini, like not a lot of people are openly out there talking about it, right? But I definitely have noticed that
They
as
don't
well.
have
And
to
I
talk
think,
about it. You go backstage at a pro bikini show, just listen to people talk. They don't have to talk about it. It talks for them. So I think, you
yeah,
know, but at that level, listen, at least I can understand. Okay, you're trying to, you know, you've been around for a while. The
well,
novices and true novices that are getting thrown right into, here's your training plan and here's your drug cycle. That's a trend I've noticed.
yeah. And I think also, like, this is the way I look at it too. Unfortunately, I think there are like a lot of the coaches out there that are pushing these drugs on athletes very early on in their journey, or like as a first time competitor. They're doing it for also selfish reasons so that they can put somebody on stage looking really good and it looks good on them as a coach, right? Like I think that's part of it
Mhm.
too. That's not cool. That's not right at all. But I think that's also part of what that, kind of comes down to.
There's something that I heard a long time ago when it comes to this, and I think there's a reason that a lot of bikini competitors don't talk about the drug side of things is if you can't take your cycle and post it online and not feel bad about it, then you may be doing a little bit too much. And that's the way I feel like a lot of the bikini route is going. It's not just dabbling in a few things here and there anymore. It's deeper than a lot of people want to admit. Not everyone, for sure, not everyone, but probably more than you would think.
Oh yeah. Used to be just, oh, everybody's doing a little bit of Anavar. Some people are maybe doing a little bit of clenbuterol. Now, if they're on 3 or 4 compounds, it's pretty
Yeah.
common. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's,
I mean, even taking a look at people's, not only the voice, I think the voice is the obvious one that we always hear about, but the face of people, like the jawline, the hairline, just their face in general. That's a big area that you can notice changing with somebody very
any
big.
bikini competitor that you're familiar with, look at their pictures from their last show. Look at their pictures from 3 years ago. It ages you. Drugs age women rapidly, um, which is fine. That's your choice. As long as you are aware of it and it's your choice, I have no problem with it. But I don't know that. I mean, I just think in 5, 10, 15 years, and there's probably some girls now that have huge regrets. A few have told me um, that they were led astray and pushed way too hard, way too fast, because it does cause some physical changes that are not going backwards.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all for just, that instant gratification. I think that's why a lot of people do sometimes hop on things, not always, but they just want that like quick, instant kind of result. They want that success a little bit quicker. But then,
Yeah, and
like
I
you
get
said,
it.
five.
What was the research they did with Olympic athletes? They said if you could take a drug that would guarantee you a gold medal, but you'd be dead in 5 years, and I think 75% of them said that they would take the drug to win a gold medal. So like that's the mindset of competitors too. Like if your coach is like, well, we're really close. If we doubled your Anavar to 30 milligrams a day, you'd get there sooner. They're like, all right, but or you could just cycle it, take 6 more months, not have any negative side effects, and get to the same place, just take a little longer without, so I think it's the responsibility of the athlete to really advocate for themselves.
I feel like that society
Yeah.
is in general now is people chase the cloud of something more than the actual reward of getting it itself. And you see that in all aspects of life, not just in bodybuilding, but in just the social media age. I heard someone talking the other day about like nightclubs, right? And when I was younger, everyone would want to go to a nightclub. It was like a fun thing to do. Everyone got there, they dance, you drink, have a good time, meet a bunch of people. Now I haven't been for from what I've heard. It's more just people go to take pictures and no one even has fun. But it's all about are you looking like you're having fun more than the actual enjoyment of the event itself with it. And that's the way I feel like a lot of stuff is, especially in the competing world, and especially in something like bikini, that let's be honest, you can have success far quicker than you can at many of the other divisions because the amount of muscle you need to carry is not near as drastic, nor does it need to be dense, hard, and mature. So, you know, the truth is you could take some shortcuts to get there a little bit quicker, but just like anything, there's no free rides in life, and that trip's going to run out for you sooner than later.
Yeah, and I mean, I
Yeah.
think that might be translating to what we're seeing in the sport. I mean, if there's less competitors at the local level, less competitors at the national level, and not for nothing, even at the pro shows, these pro shows don't have 50, 60 girls. There was what, 18, 17 at the Clash? Nashville
And
had
That sounds
Nashville had 19. I mean, these are not huge numbers for pro bikini.
I mean, and then that's kind of an issue of having a show or multiple shows every solitary weekend too. It's
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I
I
get
think
it for
that
the
could be.
pros, because with the pros, there's no height classes, there's no, it's just open bikini. But there was many years that I went to some of these shows like Tampa, and there was excess of 40 or 50
Mhm.
pros in the show.
That
You
was
don't
like
see that
3 years
anymore.
ago, 3 or 4 years ago was like
Yeah,
that.
you don't see that anymore. So you wonder, I don't know. It's just, I don't know what it means, but I'm just saying it's just we're noticing changes in the volume of people. Like when you go to a show and you're in the lobby of the hotel and you don't see a competitor for hours, like it's weird. You're like, is there a show here? Whereas like a couple of years ago, you would just smell protein and see people. So
Well, I almost wonder too. So speaking of like the pro numbers, I'm curious what the statistics, and we may not know this for a couple more years to get a good statistic for it, but like now that they took away the point system, I wonder if that's making some of these pro shows a little bit smaller, because I'm sure a lot
100%,
of girls are
absolutely.
looking at it, right? Because like a lot of girls are probably looking at it as, okay, well, I'm not going to go into the show unless I'm pretty damn confident that I can be a front runner and win, right? Whereas with the point system, people could go into shows maybe even if they didn't think they could win, but they could rack up those points over time. So I'm sure that has a lot to do with it too. And I'm always curious too, because I've heard a lot of people talk about the point system this year and how they, wish they would bring it back. And I'm curious if they will eventually bring it back.
I don't think right now, because there are still going to be over 50 qualified Olympians. And so adding those 3 other Olympians is probably not what they want to do. But I think in the years ahead, what I'm predicting, because it's going to be a trickle down effect. A lot of people didn't notice this year, but there are almost 0 pro bikini shows in California. There's like 2 the whole year. That's it. Used to be 1 all the time. So why is that? Well, the rising cost of the venues and the shrinking size of the NPC means they'd have no money to pay the pros. Pro athletes do not bring any money to a promoter. Unless your name is Nick Walker, no one's coming to see you. Andrew Jack, people like that people want to come out and see, which in Dallas, that was packed for Andrew. But no one's, all respect to the top bikini girls, outside of somebody like Laura Lee, I don't know that people are actually going to show up to see them. I've been to many shows with Ashley Kaltwasser where there's no one in the audience. When she comes out, no one cheers. Nothing against her, but like, that's not how the bikini division typically works. So you're going to have to pay these athletes. No one's paying to come see them. If you don't have the NPC numbers to support paying, the young lady that won Adair, she just won Phoenix. The prize money for winning the pro show was $2,000. I think there's going to be less pro shows.
Yeah. And I mean, people always forget to like that covers maybe her flights and her, travel there, but it's not like you're actually making
Makeup's
money.
$300. Coaching is, a couple $100 a month. Like, yeah, she's probably just putting that on her tab for her next suit or hair and makeup for the next show.
And not to mention too, these promoters that are having these pro shows, you have to pay to have these divisions at your shows too. So there's a lot of cost that goes into this, not just the prize money, but pay to actually have those divisions, right? That's why some have just bikini.
Yeah, the sanction.
Some have bikini class, there's sanctioning fees. So you have to have the NPC numbers or the sponsors to be able to even have these pro shows.
Yeah,
where it makes any sense.
So I think, Lexi, my point was, I think they'll bring back the point system when the number of qualified Olympians gets down to like 30, 35, right? And then, you add those extra 3, you can have these girls that are, getting seconds and thirds throughout the season. And it's actually exciting. The year that Lana qualified on points, it was really like fun for me and her to like strategize, because there's this whole thing, like she was in first, second, or third for like months. And then she would drop down to third, but then the girl in first for points would win a show. Then that girl goes off the board and then everyone moves up a spot. So it's like this whole, and actually the weekend that she qualified, so she went to Hawaii, the last qualifier of the year. She was in second or third. She needed I think she needed 3 points to guarantee, and she got 2 points. So the next day there was a show in Denmark. The girl that was ahead of her won the show. Lana goes to the Olympia, right? Like, that was actually fun. It made the season fun for us. And I'm sure there was a whole bunch of girls doing the same thing. I remember it was Steen Hansen, a couple girls in Europe, and it was like, so I think it does add an extra layer. Those girls probably aren't going to the Olympia to win if they're qualifying on points, but still, it's like, I liked it. I don't think that 3 more competitors at the Olympia makes much of a difference.
Honestly, if they're worried about just that difference, I think to get the numbers up, and which, look, pro shows with more pro people, it is just better for everyone around with that, especially if people, it feels like you have a chance. If you don't feel like you got a shot, then why are you going to do it? Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So push back, just eliminate 3 shows and bring back a point system that have 3 more people in there with that, or even up it to 5. Like, have some room to have some people that want to grind it out and fight it out in there. I mean, shoot, Ashlyn, what, a few years ago, she ended up getting top 10 in Olympia when she qualified off points.
Yeah, I don't
It's like
remember
4
that.
years ago.
Yeah.
Her first Olympia she went to, I remember that because she qualified off points.
Yeah, I
It was
remember
top
she
10
didn't win a pro show for years. She was getting
Mhm.
second, third. It's like, yeah.
because she won that class show we were at. That was her first pro win, and that was after she qualified or got top 10 Olympia the year before that. So just because you qualify in points doesn't mean you can't place well.
Right. But
Yeah.
my point is like for some people, you know, how many competitors have ever even been to the Olympia out of all the competitors on this
Yeah.
planet? It's a very small number. So
Mhm.
it's a huge honor to just go to the Olympia. And as a coach, I mean, having an athlete at the Olympia, you know, I've got 3 qualified Olympians right now. That's a huge honor. Like I remember thinking I'll never have a girl at the Olympia. That's just, you know, that's not the where I get to go. But yeah, so that's a part of it too. It's a big part of the sport to take part in the Olympia.
Right. Well, let's dive into a little bit about not just the shows, but let's talk a little bit about things that we've just noticed with like competitors on stage, like with their overall look, their package. And I know something that we were all talking about before we started the podcast is suits, and like the judges specifically saying like, hey, you need to make sure that your suit fits you properly, because there have been some instances where there have been girls in either the US or even overseas where I've heard of 2 instances where either their bottom is not covering enough in the front, also the back. I think you want to make sure you have enough coverage in the back. I know that's been an issue in years past for people. And then also I've heard some judges saying that girls need like better suit tops, right? Because they're not like big enough to cover. Well, it covers everything, but it's like very, very borderline. So that's something I've kind of been noticing this year. I don't know if that's not a trend by any means, but I've been just seeing some borderline suit issues when it comes to the fit. And I feel like it's almost better to have especially on top, it's better to have a suit that's almost a little too big up top rather than too small. I mean, neither is going to be good, but I would say if you had to pick, I think it would be better to have a bigger top size than you need than a smaller one. But I know that's something we were talking about that we've seen a little bit of that this season.
Yeah, I don't know if it's bikini girls rocking the wellness bottoms or if it's the way that they're pulling the suits down in the front or up on the sides. Because obviously I don't wear bikini bottoms. I don't know what would cause that. But at Tampa, the expediter came backstage and said, hey, the judges, the photographers, when Pro Bikini was doing their like individuals, they're like, check your suits. If you are doing your front pose and we can see down it, that is not good. I guess that's what was happening. So,
But too
Yeah.
much fabric in the front too, probably. I've seen a lot of that where it's like a
yeah,
gap
if
in
it
the
like
front.
gaps
where
a little bit, and
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
pretty. I mean, it's already, the sport is already pretty sexualized. You've got girls facing the back, and a lot of people will jump on that. But I mean, they're judging the muscles, they're judging the shape. But I also get the sexuality of the sport. So if you throw in a suit that's not covering everything, it's going to throw a little more shade on the sport.
And it's not something that we want to see in the sport too, because it already is pre-sexualized. And I know, especially from the outside looking in, before I was in it, I thought similar. But we can all agree with that now. That is the farthest thing from that. Like, it is not like that from the judges or from coaches or from anything with that. And it doesn't need to it all play into that any more than it already does.
I think part of the bottom situation is, so I know that a lot of suit companies, they have the option, even for bikini girls now, where you can do the V in the front, just like a slight V. I know there was a bikini competitor, a very good pro bikini competitor that wore that like a year ago. And I feel like that kind of started a little bit of a quote unquote trend. Like I know I had a lot of girls asking about the V cut in the front. So, I mean, it can work for some people, but it's definitely not going to be a good option for somebody, especially if you have like a very long torso or you're taller. Not going to be the greatest. And honestly, I think if you get a suit too from a suit company and it doesn't fit you properly, I would say I think every suit company out there has the option to do a custom cut if that's what you need as a competitor. So why not pay a little bit extra, get a custom cut, and feel confident and comfortable in your suit rather than going on stage feeling like you have to just be careful because you can't even stay in it.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a slippery slope. And you honestly, like for the bikini pose, you're not facing forward. So I don't know that a deep V is going to actually assist in anything. I think wellness, I understand it because they do face forward and it can kind of create some shapes. But with bikini, you're always to the side in a front pose. You're always turned.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And so kind of segueing into another thing on our list is, so not suit coverage, but we talked a little bit about posing, and we talked about a couple of things before we started this podcast that we wanted to share with you guys. So first thing, I know, Evan, you said that you've noticed a lot of girls are struggling with mobility or flexibility in their posing.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I find that a lot of people don't realize, especially when they're getting into the sport, how much flexibility and mobility posing requires if you want to pose properly. I mean, you can pose not having flexibility or not being mobile, but your posing is probably going to suck, right? Like there is literally no point in the bikini routine where you shouldn't have a little bit of like a low back arch, right? Like not just in the back pose, but in the front pose, you want to have a little bit of that anterior pelvic tilt. In your transitions, you want to have a little bit of that. So stretching, mobility, flexibility is so important if you want to be a good poser.
Yeah, and I have conversations with girls like this all the time, and I'll say, "How comfortable in your front pose?" It's like, "Well, it's not that uncomfortable." I'm like, "Then you can absolutely twist considerably more than you already are. Like you should struggle to hold it." And I feel like
Yeah.
a lot of people think it shouldn't be like that. And you can find some of these pictures online, but some of my favorite pictures are uh not stage photographers, but like secondary photographers that will take pictures of girls from backstage that are on stage, and you can see the angles of their body and how they're standing. It does not look natural. It does not look comfortable. And it does not look like anything you think it would look like when you're looking at somebody from their front pose. And once you kind of start seeing that, and that was a big eye opener for me for men's physique, is how I used to pose. And then I started seeing how some of the other guys were posing from the sides and how much they were turning and pushing. And it was just completely eye opening to me on how things needed to be done. And I think that would help a lot of people. So yeah, the lack of flexibility with that, and then again, kind of going with that, with the lack of flexibility, they're trying to create shape they already have, but their lack of flexibility is allowing them not to show that off. And a lot of that
Right, right.
flexibility, I think, is lower back and thoracic spine mobility. So thoracic spine is how your body moves around the spine, how your body turns like this, and people struggle with that. And that's something that, a lot of sitting at desk and things like that will create. And so for those out there that struggle with competing, just start working on your thoracic spine mobility. There's a million things on YouTube you can look up for that.
Yeah, like I just pulled up this picture. Obviously on YouTube people can kind of see, but it's of Lauralee, and it's at the, oh, this one's at the Olympia, but I always think of her front pose as like a great example of how, like, you can tell she has a little bit of that low back arch in the front pose or anterior pelvic tilt to just create more shape. And a lot of girls struggle with that. I mean, it's hard. It shouldn't feel comfortable when you're hitting that front pose. And to your point, Evan, if it feels like you could hold it for hours and hours, you are probably not twisting enough or arching enough. So, I mean, it should look natural. Like when you're holding it, it should look like it's comfortable, but internally it should not feel that way.
Yep. Yep.
Have you guys noticed, I know we didn't talk about this beforehand, but have you guys noticed anything like posing trends this year on stage? Like anybody doing
Not a lot of
doing
girls,
anything?
that arm starts to drift away from their body in that front
Yeah.
pose. And I'm like, no, bring that arm straight down. It really creates more shape. I think the arm's starting to raise up, but I don't know if that's just if that's a trend or if I will say that the posing overall on stage is not great at the NPC level. I don't know if it's just a lack. I'll say this: posing coaching is it's a hard profession. I have some great posing coaches. I'll shout all of them out. Obviously, Daraja, Brittany Hamilton, Lana Dunbar, and Kalia are my like go-tos. Super professional, know the sport, know the division, have competed very recently, so that that's important. But I don't know that there's a lot of good. Sometimes I'll be like, oh, do you have a posing coach? I'll be like, oh, yeah. I'm like, what? what are they teaching you? Because I would
Yeah.
guess you don't have a posing coach. So I would say one of the things I don't know if that's maybe always been the case. It's just there's not a lot of great posing coaches out there.
Yeah, I think it's hard
Yeah.
to find. I think it's a very saturated thing too, and that's part of the hardship of it because there's a lot of people who claim to be posing coaches out there, but there are also people that they competed 10 years ago and they're still teaching posing and they haven't quite evolved with the sport. So
Well,
they're
and in a
teaching,
different division. I had a girl recently. She's like, "Oh, I got a posing
yes,
coach." I was like, "Oh, send me your page." She's a figure pro that
Yeah.
hasn't competed in a decade.
yes.
She's got an IFBB pro
I've
card.
seen that. Yep, I've seen that too, where like the different divisions and they'll try to teach a division that they, and I'm not saying that like a figure competitor can't teach bikini posing or vice versa, but it's a little bit more rare. So I think it's just hard to find a good posing coach who not only like competes themselves or has competed, but who stays very relevant in the sport and who follows the trends and follows the evolutions of the sport. Because I mean, look at posing 10 years ago compared to posing today. Like it has changed a lot. Therefore, it is important if you are going to hire a good posing coach that that posing coach stays in tune with the evolutions that are happening every year with posing.
Yeah, I think exactly what Paul was talking about, the arm drifting away from the side. I think people are trying to create more width up top than they have. I think part of that too is people don't understand how the lat works or engage their lat at all. And on the front pose, you could just flare your lat a little bit and have that arm hang straight down and not have to lift it away from your body. So I think that's part of it. I think another thing I've noticed a lot of is people really trying to sit into their hip in their front pose, which means their body's going to lean a little bit too far forward. So they literally cannot let that arm hang down. If they do, it's going to cut off half their glute because of how they're sitting so hard into that glute. So again, that's trying to create shape that's not there. And the judges notice that on stage as
Oh
well.
yeah, they definitely do. Because I remember, and I just, this has really stuck with me. I remember 2 years ago at the NPC Women's Workshop, Etala specifically said, she's like, we can tell when somebody is trying way too hard to create something that isn't quite there. She's like, we can see right through that as judges. And like we don't want to see that. We can like that draws attention to the competitor in a bad way, and we can tell that they're trying to like they're basically showing us that they don't have something and they're overcompensating in a certain way. So,
Mhm.
it goes back to posing should look natural, but does it feel natural? Does it feel comfortable? No, but it should kind of visually appear that way.
Yeah, I'm going to draw kind of an example of what it looks like to people in the know. So everyone's seen those kind of guys, right? They just try way too hard. They're wearing like head to toe Gucci tracksuits and designer everything and gold chain everywhere. And it's too much. You can tell they're just trying so hard to create a person that they're not really are. That's kind of what it looks like on stage when you know what you're looking at. So just get up there, do the best you can, pose the best you can, show off everything you have, the best of your ability. But it's going to be obvious if you're trying to create something that's not there.
Yes. Yeah. And then another big thing that we talked about was core control. I feel like I don't think this is just like, I don't think this is a new trend or a new observation, but I mean, it's hard. Like as a bikini girl, it is hard to hold your front pose for a long period of time in comparisons, but that core control is so important. I mean, there's nothing worse than watching from the audience and seeing a girl who has a really good physique just like let her core go in her transition or let her core go as she's walking. Like it just doesn't look good.
Yeah. To me,
Yeah,
that's a huge one with that.
I don't really ever notice that with my competitors because once you're conditioned and you're eating well, your digestion's good. It's yeah, you shouldn't really have to control your core. And we're not talking about 300-pound bodybuilders who have like distension. Like you should have a pretty tight core. And if you're posing tall, it's going to keep your core tight. There are some girls
Yeah,
that try to push into the glute and then they get a little bit of like their stomach pushes out the opposite way.
yeah. And I think a lot of times too, moms who have had kids, they
Yeah,
struggle a little
that's
bit
what I
more
said.
with that like core control, maybe. Yeah. So like to your point, Paul, I do agree. I think once you get like super peeled, it is a lot easier to just control your core because there's not as much there to control. But I do tend to notice that people who have had multiple babies, they have a little bit of a weaker pelvic floor. And that's why I think a little bit of pelvic floor strengthening work can actually really help and transpire into good core control on stage. I know everybody talks about vacuums, and I think those are great too, but I mean, you don't have to do vacuums. That's not the only thing you have to do to get that core control. I think some pelvic floor work can help, especially for people who have had kids.
Yeah. And another thing too, I've seen with a few of my athletes that have struggled at times with it, and it's a trend of those are the girls that have to eat a lot of food to fill out with it. So we're trying to take a different approach where it's overfill kind of on Thursday and back food down more on Friday. So they just don't have as much in there to control with it. So that's kind of a coaching can play a role in that as well. But sometimes it's girls just say like I just they get up there and they get nervous, right? And they're not thinking about that. They're thinking about everything else. When if you have here's the biggest thing with all of this is that is the center of your physique, right? That is dead center. Everything revolves around your core. So while the core is not specifically judged, right? Not like the shoulders or the glutes are with it, you have to think that is the center point of your entire body. So if that is not good, that is not tight, or something is off with that, nothing else is going to flow correctly either. So while it's not
Yeah,
directly judged, I do think it's one of the most important parts of the entire physique.
Yeah, there needs to
absolutely.
be some tightness there. It can't be a blob, blurry mess. We've seen competitors come out and you're like, they either haven't had enough water, they're having a food out reaction. You can just see like there's like
Oh,
the heaviness to their stomachs.
we saw that some earlier
Yeah.
pro shows this year, Paul, how like even some of the girls at near the top, it was like just tough with the core area in there earlier on in the
Yeah.
year. And
Yeah.
there could be a
Yeah. Well,
bunch of
another
reasons
thing.
for that, by the way. A bunch of
Yeah.
reasons.
Well, binge eating and all kinds of weird things. Typically,
Water manipulation, messing with
yeah.
your sodium too much, pulling water, diuretic, all that stuff can play factors.
Yeah. There's another thing I've kind of noticed too, more so recently this year. And I think the biggest thing that makes me think of this is Tyler Mannion has obviously started putting out those recap videos, but I feel like there's just been a lot more transparency too around like judging feedback. I feel like a lot more judges are give like very open with
That
that
is
feedback.
true. It's almost a requirement that the judges stay now. I don't know if that's something they've talked about. As a coach who's been around the sport for a decade now, I know all the judges and promoters. And so like I'm able to have those conversations, but I feel like it used to feel like a privileged thing. And now anybody that stays after the show gets feedback, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah. I really appreciate that they do that. And I think I love Tyler's recap videos. And I encourage anybody listening to this, if you're not following Tyler Mannion on Instagram, like follow him because he puts out some really good, like very simple to the point recap videos of different placings for like the pro shows. And I think that can be very valuable because obviously the standard for the pro shows is going to be the standard at NPC shows as well. So I think that's just a really good resource to follow.
And the best part about that resource too is how open he is about the competition, and especially in bikini, there's been a few times he say, "Hey, this could have gone either way, right here. You can make an argument for this person winning or this person winning, and I really couldn't argue with either of that." He will openly say things like that, which is awesome, right? And that's also why you have a panel of judges. It
Yes.
shows, not just
Yes.
one judge. And what we've talked, I
Yeah.
mean, we got feedback at the Texas show, and some of the judges said, "Hey, like they're very honest with you. They'll say, 'Hey, I had you over this other person.' But sometimes things just don't always work out that way, and they'll be honest with you. So don't be afraid to get feedback, obviously, and pay attention to those videos because a lot of times you will question things, and then when you watch those videos, it all makes sense."
Yeah, and
Yeah. And
I've had a few consults lately where, I'm talking to a competitor. They just did a show that I was at, and they're like, I was like, "Oh, so what was your feedback?" I didn't get any feedback. Oh, okay. I mean, you're there at the show, just especially bikinis last. So
Yeah.
just stay to the overall and go to the judges table. It's a few more minutes of your time to really, because sometimes you might even be bitter and you might be upset. and then you might talk to the judge and you'll be like, oh, okay. That's really what helped me as a coach get over this idea of politics. You hear that all the time, and it's a great excuse if you didn't do the work or if you weren't as good as someone else to be like, I didn't win, but it was politics. Go talk to the judges. I promise you, they have an answer. They're going to tell you something. They're going to tell you something was better on that other person. And it just might spark you to be a better athlete, a better coach. But if you just go home and just, you know, give into that, wow, the judge just doesn't like me. I've heard that so many times. Sandy doesn't like me. I'm like, have you ever spoken to Sandy? She loves everybody. She has to separate personal opinion from judging. She doesn't see a girl walk out and be like, I don't like her, but to be fair, you might not have a good structure. You might not have the muscle. She might have told you to get fuller and you got leaner, and that's the other, when judges don't look at you, I hear that all the time. They never looked at me. They never looked at me. You weren't good enough. Like they cannot take their eyes off the winners. That's just the way it is.
I mean, honestly, and that's the way the cookie crumbles too. And that's unfortunately, if you get stuck in a bad initial call out and you walk out there and there is one or two people that are fighting to win that show and they're kind of 3-4 spots down from you, they'll may glance your direction, but who do you think is getting the main look there? The people that they're looking for the winners first. They're always going to look for the winners first.
Yeah. And I've also noticed this year, I feel like there has also been a lot more like live streams at shows. I feel like it's almost more rare to not have a show with a live stream. But I think that's very valuable too. I mean, especially if you are wanting to be a student of the sport, if you're a newer athlete and you want to kind of study things a little bit more, or just maybe you're a fan and you want to watch the shows from afar. But these live streams are usually pretty good. I've noticed that the quality of them this year is a lot better than they've ever been in the past. And I also think too, like if you're a competitor competing at a show, getting and like purchasing the live stream and then downloading it and being able to rewatch yourself later and to see how you compared and stacked up against your competition, like that could be a really great way to also kind of critique your own flaws too and know what you need to work on. So I think the live streams have just been getting better and better, and there seems to be a lot more of them too.
Yeah, I think you could judge yourself based on presentation and structure and flow. But please don't watch a show on a live stream and think you saw the same thing the judges are sitting at the table, because it is definitely not that.
Oh, no.
It is night and day
I
difference.
mean, you and I have even, Evan, been sitting 20 rows back watching a show and then go sit up behind the judges. It's a completely different animal when you're right up on people.
Completely.
So
you see
Yes.
things.
makes
You
it super
see-
clear. Yeah.
When, especially like in bikini, when they walk to the back, you will notice things that people do not notice. And when you're
Right.
sitting up there, it's clear as day when you're that
Right.
close the most of the time.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, one kind of, we can, if there's any other topics, or not topics, but points after this, we can share them too. But one of the last things I can think of that I feel like has become kind of, or something I've been noticing, is we've talked a lot about how numbers at shows have been dropping, but I have noticed, and I feel like I don't know the exact statistics, but it seems like there's a lot more like masters kind of taking over like the competing space now. I feel like people maybe are getting beyond that point where they think, oh, I'm too old to compete. I think people are realizing that that's not really a thing. But I feel like there's been an influx of more like masters competitors more so recently.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think the sport is definitely reaching a new audience in that regard. Obviously, typically the masters competitors are at a different phase in their life. They're not maybe raising kids. They're, more financially stable, and they're starting to self-actualize and do things in their life that, they've kind of always wanted to do. So competing is one of those. Miriam Jenkins just won the 50 and over at the Clash this last weekend. She's 58, by the way. She's not 50. So she's doing amazing things. And a lot of these competitors in this sport are just showing that age does not matter when you are consistent and putting in the work. And this will be a big weekend for that. North Americans, and I think this was the case at Universe too. It was way more Masters than Open.
Mm-hmm.
The Masters crossing over into Open is what made the Open numbers look decent. But I got a funny feeling it's going to be a very small show for the Open classes at North Americans.
And I think one of the big reasons for that is the financial stability part. And the older you get, the more likely it is that you have some disposable income to be able to put towards things that you enjoy. Um, look, when you're young and, you're 22, 23, 24 years old and you got to pay, 200-300 bucks a month for coaching on top of the food, on top of everything else, on top of the competing, that gets expensive. And that's hard to maintain for a lot of people, especially younger people. The older you get, not near a big of a deal. I think that's one of the big reasons.
That's it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's 1000%. The big reason why there's an influx in those numbers is just the more discretionary income, more financially stable. And a lot of those girls too. I mean, if they've been lifting for a long time, they have a lot of that muscle maturity. So they don't have to necessarily spend as much time growing as like a younger competitor would.
All right. And the
Yeah.
last thing I want to touch on to end this is that the NPC and IFBB do seem to be pushing the drug-free side of the sport a little bit more. I don't know if that's a response to the changes in numbers. Maybe some of the other natural organizations are actually doing very well. I don't know. But the fact that to qualify for the Ben Weider this year used to just be an open show. You could go do it. Now you have to compete in a drug-tested show prior to the Ben Weider. So that means you're going to get drug tested twice in the same season. And then next year, I believe you're going to have to qualify to compete at the Ben Weider as a pro. You're going to have to place, I don't know if it's going to be first or top 5 or whatever, or maybe just do a show before the Ben Weider. So there will be more natural pro shows. Those will not be qualifiers for the Olympia. They will be qualifiers for the Ben Weider. So there'll be feeders into that. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's been brought up to me.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm excited to see how that goes too. And honestly, just excited after this year to see what the numbers and the statistics are for these natural shows. Because I would anticipate if they're bringing in a lot of athletes that the NPC is gonna continue to put these shows on. And I know I've had a lot of girls that like have expressed being really happy and excited that there are these natural shows. So it'll be interesting to see what the numbers look like for those by the end of this year.
100%. It's just a change. It's almost like, okay, they're going to introduce a new division, which they're not, but like, you're just curious to see what happens when they do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, any other final thoughts on this topic, you guys?
No, I think that's on most of the stuff I've noticed this year. Obviously
Yeah,
we've got a couple weeks to really end the season, and then we've got, like nationals, but it's going to be an interesting end of the year. And then I just got a feeling there's going to be a shift in the sport next year. I think there's going to be some changes. We'll see.
We'll see.
only time will tell. Cool. Well, also to give a quick shout out before we wrap this up, I don't know the exact dates of the start date, but I do want to give a shout out to our Pro Physique Transformation Challenge that we have coming up. Paul, do you know the exact dates for that off the top of your head?
All into fitness. It'll be about a week after this comes out. I think it's the Monday after.
Okay.
I think I think this comes out on the 22nd. I'm sorry, the 2nd. I think it starts on the 9th.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I know that Christina, Sarah, Maria, like they have been putting together some awesome resources that these challengers are going to get. So
Oh gosh,
definitely
the meal plans alone are worth it. The training plans. Yeah, it's the community. There's so much value for $50.
Yeah. And I mean, you can already be a pro physique athlete if you want to do it just for an extra incentive, but this is open to anybody who's on the team, off the team. And it's just like a fun little extra incentive and challenge for, to end the year. So
Perfect.
cool. All right. Well, I think it was a good one. And hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode on this topic. If there are any other topics that you guys want us to specifically speak on, you can shoot me a DM on Instagram, or I'm sure you can shoot Evan or Paul a DM as well, because we do always like to take that feedback.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, guys.
Keep us in the loop. We will see you at North Americans, although this will be out after. So we'll do a little review of that.
Yeah.
You know what? I haven't done this in a while. I'm going to do a vlog on my phone. from meeting all the
Yeah, you
athletes at the
should.
gym, do some posing stuff, get some show clips. It's just been a minute. You know, sometimes you get in your own head about doing content, but I'm going to do a weekend in the life of coach. So
That would be fun, Paul. You should definitely do that because you know what? I've gotten a lot of feedback recently on my own YouTube channel. Like I very much so sometimes overthink what I put out. Like I always think it needs to be like of value or something informative. But I've had a lot of people recently tell me they're like, no, I like the vlogs. It just kind of like they're very good passive listens. So yeah, I'm a fan. You should do a vlog this weekend.
you got it.
All right.
All right,
Appreciate
guys.
it, guys.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.